you're going to hear the sound of the guitar being played. That's not in the final sound that is built in the software, obviously. That's just an accident of the way that I set up the recording software, which I haven't really played with before, so it's a happy accident that it's there, but I think it's helpful that you can hear what I'm physically playing on the guitar to get the sounds that you're hearing. So here's a C5, for example, and turn up the volume, that would help. Then a E9, no, G9. Alright, so I'm going to talk about this ambient wash sound that I came up with that I'm really happy with. Most of the time when you record yourself playing guitar, you get the sound of the guitar itself plus an effect added to it. But it's not difficult to set it up so that you only record the effect and not the original sound itself. So the tone of the guitar, etc., doesn't really matter that much. So let's talk about the effects that I'm getting here. And these are not applied sequential to each other. So it's not delay and reverb and pitch shift. Each one is built separately and they're all combined in the end in one big sound, which sounds like you heard at the start of the video. So let's take a look at what the original sound is itself. I'll just turn off all these sends. It's a little awkward because you can only see 4 at a time. So if I play this, well, there's no sound because the original sound has been turned down to 0. So I have to actually turn this back up. So that long feedback and a bit of grit is coming from a combination of this Rift feedback plugin, the free Rift feedback Lite. Everything I've used is free, by the way. And Lagrange, this excellent delay slash reverb slash granular plugin that's just a lot of fun to play with. If you don't want it to ring on as long as I have it here, just turn this feedback down and you'll get much less effect. There we go. So that's the original signal. But as I said, I'm not really recording much of that. So let's go ahead and turn the sound of the original back down, and I'm going to turn these effects on one at a time. That's on. So the most important setting here is this post fader needs to be turned off. Obviously with the sound turned completely down, if I had this switched on, there would be no sound left to send to the effect. If I just play my guitar now, nothing goes through because this has been turned down to 0. So turn this off, play, and something gets sent through. So I'm using this Sanford delay, but any delay would work here. The settings are all turned up pretty high. And this one is set to 1/8 of a sorry, that's a 1/8 note delay to the tempo that I'm using. But you tune that to whatever you want it to have. Octave down. This is where it really gets fun. So I'm using this magnificent plugin from SoundHack, which can do a pitch shift to any value that you want. So if I put it to 2 to 1, that's going to be an octave up. If you set it to, so you have to change it to cents here with this button in the bottom left and put that on 700, and that's a fifth. So I play a C, and I get a C and a G. You can hear it goes up to a D there a little bit because I have this feedback turned on. So this makes it this feeds the effect signal back into itself. So the C that I play becomes a G, then the G becomes a D, maybe the D becomes an A. If you turn this up really high, it's just going to ring on forever. So you don't want to do that. Otherwise, every note you play is just going to be chaos, unless that's what you're after. So this one is set to -1200 or 1 to 2, and this is my octave down shifter. I've done the same thing over here. You can guess on this one that's called fifth. This is exactly the same control, roughly the same feedback level, and it's set to 700. So whatever note I play gets set to a fifth above what I'm playing. the fourth one over here, the FOURTH fourth, is set to 600 or possibly 500. We should check that in a second. So these are the guys, yeah, 500. So those are the guys that give me my my harmonizing. So if I turn on fifth, I'm going to play C, and you should hear C, a C an octave down, and a G. And I've got the fifth turned down quite a lot, I'm not giving it much signal, so if I turn that up, you'll hear a lot more G this time. And obviously, you tune the volumes here to taste, so if you don't want so much octave, turn that down a bit. Same with the fifth. Now let's talk about where everything's feeding into, because I've got this wonderful reverb sound happening, and this is the heart of the whole sound, and this is this magnificent plugin by Valdemar Erlingsson, Cloudseed. It's a very clever reverb utility that can make these big, gentle sounds that I really enjoy playing with. I've turned dry out really far down, well, to 0 basically, because I don't want any of the signal that it is receiving to come back out to me. I just want to hear what it generates from it. There's no visual indication as you're playing. You don't see any kind of any levels or meters or feedback to see which of these things is lighting up. So I'm using this preset, chorus delay. There aren't many presets in here. Some of them have fairly short reverb, like small room, but most of them are big, like this hyperplane. It just rings on forever. And did you notice we heard the guitar that I was playing there, because dry out was turned back up again. So I'll turn that back down to 0 and play again. Just hearing the wash of sound. Here, turn that down. Okay, I haven't just changed my settings. Alright, so building this is fairly straightforward. Oh, there's one last thing to talk about that's very important. The out of all of these. We'll talk about this, this one send that I have here later on. The out part of all of these, we don't want these going straight to the master. If I changed it so that these things are on the default settings that you get when you create a bus, then you're going to go back to hearing the guitar. Like I said, each of these sends only applies one effect, but I don't want to hear each of the effects coming out separately. So they are all routed to the big reverb send. So they take the original guitar signal, they muffle it, they add their effect to it, and then they send it into the reverb channel, which is here. That's where that lives, and I've got this wider plugin which does funny things with stereo and makes the sound wider. That's a lot of fun to play with too. The second delay that I have here, it just has slightly different settings. I've got it set to, instead of an eighth note on both left and right, this goes to quarter note and half note. It doesn't do dotted or triplets. You could just use a different delay plugin which would do that, and fiddle with the settings here. Obviously, if you turn the feedback up too high, the notes are never going to stop. So have them high, but not too high. All right, so that's the basics of it. To create each of these things, what you would do, let's say I get rid of, well, let's say I'd like to add another layer of harmony. I right click and create a new stereo bus. I drag a copy of the thing that I want in there. Let's say I want it to go to there. So it's going to do a pitch delay by two semitones. Then I go back over to the original track here and I say I want to make a new send. I want it to go to bus J, which is the new one, and it adds it to my pile of sends here. I go down to the bottom, turn off post because the post signal is completely 0. And now I'll just turn off the fifth so it doesn't get in the way. So if I play a C, you should hear a D in there somewhere. So I'm playing down, and it's playing down in return for me. And the reason we're hearing the guitar is I forgot to change the output. So let's talk about the send within the send that I have here. On the octave down channel, it also sends a copy of itself off to the delay. So besides making a single copy of the lower octave effect, it sends that off to the first delay as well, so that gives you more of that bottom end. If I wanted to, I could also send it to, let's say, the second delay channel to get even more overlapping octave sounds. Alright, so that's the sound I came up with. I'm really happy to share it with you, and it's a lot of fun to play around with. Keeping the signal going for as long as you want is an interesting juggling act. It's done really mostly with the feedback plugin on the original signal. So if you turn this up, if you put it on 100, any note you play is just going to ring forever. So I just played a note.